Okay, so what if the Bible, this massive collection of ancient texts written over centuries, actually came with its own instruction manual? A brand new book is arguing exactly that. That buried right there in the New Testament are the apostles' own directions for how to read the entire story. So, could there really be a hidden user's guide for one of the most influential books in the world? Let's dig in.
I mean, that's the big problem, right? This is the fundamental challenge for anyone trying to get their head around the Bible as a single book. You've got poetry, history, prophecy, letters. How are you supposed to connect all the dots from Genesis to Revelation without just getting totally lost? It's a massive puzzle that has frankly stumped scholars for a very long time.
And yeah, stumped might be putting it mildly. For centuries, the academic world has been a bit of a battlefield of competing theories on how to do what they call biblical theology, which is just a fancy way of saying trying to read the whole Bible as one story. There's been no real agreement, no shared roadmap for making sense of the whole thing, and this confusion is exactly the problem that the authors of this new book are trying to fix.
Okay, so what's their big idea? How do they propose to crack this code? Well, they call it the exposed iceberg. The whole argument is that instead of digging for secret, hidden clues, the biblical authors actually left their blueprint for how to read the story right there on the surface, in plain sight for all of us to see.
And this iceberg metaphor is honestly the perfect way to understand their approach. Think about it. For a long time, most scholars have been playing detective, right? They're digging around for the submerged part of the iceberg, those really subtle echoes and hidden references that you practically need a PhD to even spot. But these authors are saying, hey, maybe we've all been looking in the wrong place. They argue we should focus on the part that's sticking right out of the water, the obvious, explicit, detailed summaries of Israel's history that the apostles themselves gave us.
And they've got a name for these passages, Summaries of Israel's Story, or SIS for short. But here's the thing. To qualify as an SIS, a passage can't just be some quick mention. No, it has to be a pretty lengthy chronological retelling of the key people, the key events, and the key moments that make up the story of Israel. And in the New Testament, they've identified 7 of these key summaries.
All right, so that's the theory. Sounds interesting, right? But what does it actually do? How does looking for these summaries change the way we read a text we think we already know? Let's pop the hood and look at what one reviewer called the book's absolute strongest example. So let's take the genealogy in the Gospel of Matthew. You know, that long list of names a lot of us might just skim over? Well, the authors say, hold on, it's not just a list, it's this incredibly structured argument. It creates a beautiful pattern from Abraham up to King David, then from David back down into the tragedy of the exile. But then the pattern breaks. The exile is shown to be this huge unresolved problem in Israel's story, a break that just hangs there until, finally, the last step, the arrival of the Messiah, Jesus, who completes the pattern and brings the exile to an end. Now this is where the method gets really, really cool. When you look at the summary this way, something else pops out that's often missed. The Gentile women in that list, Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, are often seen as kind of scandalous, right? Out of place. But the authors argue they're actually the heroes of the story. They're savior figures. At these critical moments when the whole family line was about to die out, they stepped in and saved it, setting the stage for a Messiah who would end up saving not just Israel, but all nations.
So, what are other scholars saying about this? What's the verdict out there? Well, it turns out the book has been getting a lot of praise for this new and innovative approach. Let's take a look at some of the key strengths that the reviewers have been highlighting.
First off, pretty much everyone agrees that this SIS category is itself a huge contribution. It gives scholars a powerful new tool for their toolbox. That deep dive into Matthew's genealogy we just talked about, people are calling it genuinely illuminating. On top of that, the book's work on other texts, like the book of Hebrews, is being described as theologically sophisticated, and its overall goal, to find a rule of faith, basically a user's guide from the text itself, is seen as really ambitious and productive.
But, of course, no book is perfect. And to get the full picture, we have to look at where reviewers felt the argument kind of fell short. It's really important to see these limitations to get a balanced view.
Okay, so here's the biggest critique. The book makes this huge leap. It goes from saying this is one way the apostles read the story to this is the only way we must read it. And reviewers felt that massive claim was pretty underdeveloped. Some parts, like the chapter on Galatians, were seen as the weakest in the book. And maybe most importantly, for a book about the earliest Christians, it kind of skips over how other huge figures like the church fathers Irenaeus and Augustine read these same texts. It also doesn't really engage with modern scholars who would challenge its entire premise from the get-go.
So all of this, it brings us right to the book's final, most provocative claim. because this isn't just about offering a new reading method. It's suggesting something way, way bigger about what the Bible actually is.
And here it is, the whole point. The ultimate goal is to create a rule of faith. Think of it like a theological instruction manual that's pulled directly from how the apostles themselves summarized the story. The argument is that we don't need to invent our own systems for reading the Bible. The apostles already gave us one. We just have to pay attention.
And that's really the question this whole thing leaves us with, isn't it? Is this exposed iceberg theory the key that finally unlocks a unified reading of the whole Bible? Or is that jump from describing how the apostles read to prescribing how we must read today just a step too far? That's the fascinating debate this book has kicked wide open.